Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Scooter Space podcast. Today I am joined by Sam Rigelsford, and what we will be discussing is all about the boardroom seesaw and how the soft skills actually make the difference in today's security world. So why did we choose this topic? Well, basically because being a CISO these days is much more about technical depth. You have to go into the boardroom and A, have to sell security to your peers, but then B, also get across that while security, it is a cost center, it isn't a cost center. Which argument do you want to go down there? And actually get across to those in the boardroom that are your peers that security is an important factor and we need to pay more attention to it. And how do we do that? Well, we do it via communicating terminology in their language. But it's not as easy as said than done. And I'm sure that Sam will take us on a journey as to how he does it in the next half an hour. But before we get into it, Sam, are you okay just to give the audience a little bit of a background to yourself, if that's okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick, and thank you for having me. So Sam Rigelsford, I've been in information and cybersecurity for 20 years. I started off my career, for those of you that are long enough in the tooth and can remember Message Labs, I started there when they yeah, a little while after they found the I love you bug, and the business grew as part of that. So I've been really fortunate through my career to have done some really interesting things and worked for some really interesting companies. I've got a lot of quite big names in the back catalogue, which has been really beneficial to me. So I've worked, interesting places doing quite different things at places like Dyson, at really big enterprise, places like Zurich, places like Aviva. So I've been very fortunate. Most recently, I was Chief Information Security Officer at EDF Energy. So looking after the company, which most people will know from the retail side in terms of selling gas and electricity, and may or may not know that they run the 8 nuclear power stations in the UK and are building 2 more. As well as some other businesses as part of the group there. And then in April I moved to FNZ, which is really exciting for me because FNZ is fintech, very cutting edge, very fast paced. I really like the pace. There's some absolutely fantastic people that I'm working with there. So really excited to kind of get stuck in and really coming up to speed there at FNZ. So
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Sam. And yeah, I think we're very much in capable hands in the next half an hour to kind of discuss this topic. So I suppose to kind of jump in on this one, in your experience, Sam, across the different sectors that you've been in, do you think that the role of the seesaw has changed sort of in the past, let's say even in the past decade, or even in the past 5 years, for example? Do you think it's changed at all?
yeah, I think it has, and I think it's reasonably well documented, probably in lots of places around some of those changes. And I think the biggest one is around how it's moved from somebody who knows, understands, and can do security to somebody who is, a business person who can speak the language of the business, is able to communicate well with senior leaders within the business, and has really that gravitas around being able to influence what the business is doing and how they go about doing it. So yeah, that shift away from being a technologist probably towards being much more business orientated, I think has definitely happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and what do you think sort of prompted that then?
I suspect it will have been around the changing trends and threats that we've seen has really necessitated that change. So we went from a kind of attitude in industry of, well, that's great, but it won't happen to us, right? To sort of explaining that, well, it might happen to you, and let's try and kind of get in front of that, to a point where we're now almost at the point where businesses are saying, well, it's inevitable that it's going to happen to us anyway. So how do we kind of focus on resilience and those sorts of things rather than necessarily trying to prevent the inevitable from happening? So I think as boards and executive teams have kind of gone on that slightly emotional journey of it's not my problem to, oh my God, everything is terrible, to, okay, what can we actually do about this? They've really needed to have sensible grown-up conversations about it, and not from a purist point of view where you might prescribe every potential control you could possibly have. Actually, you need to be a little bit more pragmatic about it, and those that have been really successful have been able to link what they're doing in the security space to proper business outcomes. Being able to explain, was you said in your intro around security being a cost center. Yes, I think it is a cost of doing business, if I'm honest. But how big that cost is really still does depend on boards and executive committees
Yep.
to kind of make that risk-based decision. So being able to articulate it and measure it in a sensible way that people can understand and make an informed decision on is really key.
Absolutely. And I suppose in my extremely biased viewpoint of working in cyber sales, that yes, of course, cyber is a cost center, but everything is a cost center. Yes, your sales team will produce an ROI, absolutely, but like that's pretty much the one area that will do it. Everything else will come with a cost, but it's just all about how you align that with the risk and how much it's worth risking everything. Let's look at this year, Co-op Harrods, retail sector got absolutely smashed, and it's like, yeah, they might not be like the fir they Scooty might not have been at the forefront of them. I know that they're absolutely established brands, and I know they've got very, very good security teams in there, which is case in point that even with the best security teams, you still could get hit, which is even more so to the point that you need to be paying more attention to security in today's world. So absolutely, I think that whilst it is a cost center, it should be one that is looked at absolutely. So in a roundabout way, Sam, my next question to you is: how do you go about translating risk to the board then, and how you do it not in a purist sense?
Yeah, so I think it's the first point is to really understand the business and what the business is trying to achieve. So if you can link some of these risks to their business outcomes that they're looking to achieve, that is much more impactful. So, perhaps some of your business outcomes are that you want to, expand into a new territory or a new sector. Perhaps it's that, you want to establish a certain level of growth. Perhaps it's that you want to land, certain contracts. You can link all of these things through to security to say, well, this is how it might affect it. So, for example, if you're in a construction business, actually, a ransomware event is going to lead to X number of days of, downing tools, right? And you're able to put a monetary value on that fairly quickly because that is how the business operates, and it will, measure these sorts of things in days' effort and those sorts of things. So that's perhaps an easier example. But those that really want to expand into a new sector or a new territory. Being aware of perhaps some of the regulatory concerns there, perhaps some of the things that potential clients there would be looking for, and how can you make security a differentiator? So, for example, in the UK, we've got Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus. If you want to do lots of work in the government sector, that's somewhere where you can say, well, actually, we want to achieve a higher level of security. And I know we can go into the debate of compliance versus security and all the rest of that. But actually, it will be beneficial to our business. It's not just something that we want to do as a vanity project. This is something that will actually help you to achieve the goals that you're setting out to do. So the first step has got to be to understand exactly what the business is trying to achieve, and link everything bad that could possibly happen to those outcomes in as tangible a way as possible. You mentioned there around co-op and Marks and Spencers. I mean, first of all, I think their teams did an absolutely fantastic job, and under really difficult circumstances. I think if you speak to anybody with any experience in the industry, they'd acknowledge that that could have been any of us really. It was a very difficult position that they found themselves in, and were able to deal with it extremely well. Those sorts of events certainly help, although it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So when those sorts of things help within your sector, you'll find that suddenly, those board conversations open up. We want to talk to you an awful lot more. How do we prevent being that person? And, honestly, the answer is quite often, well, we needed to have started 3 or 4 years ago, probably. But we'll do what we can in the next couple of months. But also as these things sort of move cross-industry, and that threat actor, for example, pivoted towards airfare, airliners, and for them to be able to take the learnings from co-op Marks and Spencers, etc., and really honestly assess themselves against that particular threat, I think would have been very helpful. Where I say it's a double-edged sword, though, is you often get very jumpy executives or members of the board that want to know lots of things that simply we don't know yet. So it's hit BBC News that the co-op has got some problems. What's happened? How do we prevent that from happening to us? Well, we've no idea what's happened yet, and realistically, we're not going to for a little while. So we can do our kind of best guess. We can share information as best we can across industry, and I think that's really important to support each other. I think where firms work really in isolation and in a kind of isolationist kind of approach, I think does them harm. So you're able to kind of start putting some of these things in place, but say it's a double-edged sword because you're being asked questions you might not necessarily know the answer to, and because you are the person in the organization that's supposed to understand this stuff, you need to maintain that credibility, that gravitas around your subject matter. So people, will naturally try to answer it as best they can, or perhaps they're very honest and say, well, I just don't know yet.
Yeah.
But it's about knowing your own stakeholders really, and how best, that they will react to those sorts of answers. But
Absolutely, no, a really terrific point, and it reminded me of a conversation that I had with Max Gill a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's all about the double-edged sword of the role of the CISO and how, like, on one side, it's like you've got to fight to get budget and to fight to get just resource for your team, and you've got to fight, you know, all day long to try and get this available for you. But on the flip side, if you get breached, it's like, oh, why have we been breached? Why are we not secure? Why this? Why that? And it's like, well, it's kind of like, well, I've been trying to warn you about it. And then that also segues to another great point that you made about sort of, yeah, if we don't know yet, we don't know. And there's a very, very key difference between information and intelligence. Information, there's a lot of noise out there, and it could be like, oh yeah, we've had all these leaked credentials go out to the dark web, but like we know about them, but the risk priority was low. It wasn't necessarily like, in terms of our attack surface, it was a bit low. Like, and things do get out there. No company is 100% secure. But then there might be a risk matrix where you're like, yeah, we do know about that, and it was a high risk, and we are dealing with it. That's why obviously like threat intelligence in today's world is, becoming even more so important so that we can foresee what's about to come. But yeah, that's all part of the journey and the maturity of sort of the like as a company's posture, and that's what the CISO tries to put into the strategy. It's absolutely it's in their plans. They're not Nobody wants to get breached, but it's a step-by-step process. Um, what I wanted to ask you next, Sam, was yes, you've got to communicate risk, but how do you do about it without fear-mongering? And how do you do it in a way where you're building trust and we're on the same team? Security, we're not trying to catch you out. We're not trying to do these phishing campaigns to be like, ha ha, look at this guy. It's like, no, we're trying to create security champions within the organization and we're just trying to build trust. How do you go about that?
I think there's a few ways that kind of subtly come together really. One of the ways is as I say, really linking that to business outcomes, but I've made that point already, so I won't labor it. Another one is really demonstrating that you are prioritizing. So, if everything's a priority, then nothing is ultimately. And it's very easy to go with your list of here are all of our problems that we must go and solve. And what we quite often don't do is go along and say, well, look, there's 100 things we could do. Actually, these are the top 10 that I'm worried about. And this is why I'm worried about them and what we intend to do about them. The
Yeah.
other 90 things, perhaps we'll get to 40 or 50 of them, in subsequent years. And the other ones, frankly, I don't think are relevant. But you set up that kind of watching brief around where we get threat intelligence in, we understand what's happening in the industry. I speak with my peers, those sorts of things. And as these things change, absolutely, I'll come to you and say, well, actually, that thing that we didn't care about a little while ago, suddenly I do. And here's why. And you can explain it. So you almost make them part of that decision-making process without them realizing it. So you've got people on the board who perhaps have never been cyber experts, don't know anything, maybe even about technology, let alone kind of cyber security, but they feel informed and kind of empowered with that sort of thing to say, well, this is how far we want to go realistically, and this is how we can do it. I think one of the bigger issues that we come across when speaking with boards and executive committees is less about getting the investment. I think a lot of CISOs manage to get some investment and build a strategy. It's more about updating as that strategy develops, to really show some tangible value and to say, well, actually, money has been well spent. This is where we're now safer, and this is where we've still got problems. And the question that always kind of comes back, and I'm going to massively oversimplify it, is, well, we gave you, X million pounds. We're secure now, right? Well, no, you're not, and you're never going to be. So it's how you articulate that to say, well, actually, we're much safer from these particular scenarios, and we're worried about these particular scenarios because they link to these business outcomes. We've actually still got a major gap, over here, and perhaps that's going to come to the fore because of, regulatory change, or perhaps because of client, obligations or expectations, because those have changed massively over the last sort of decade, or perhaps, we're not going to worry about those things because there's no real threat there at the moment. So it's trying to kind of bring together the risk management and the threat intelligence into one kind of view.
Yeah, that segues very nicely to what I wanted to ask you next as well, which is essentially if I am the CEO of an organization and you're my CISO, Sam, and I've got a CTO, and I've only got X in the pot now for this quarter, and I am leaning towards giving the CTO this pot of money because the product team needs this money to either A, get some more devs in, or B, they just need advancements with the tech stack or whatever it might be. And that right now is more urgent for our business needs as opposed to security. Um, how, what would you respond with if I was say like, look, Sam, I'm really sorry, but you're not getting this pot of money out. It's going to go to the dev team. How would you resolve said conflict? What would your view be, and how would you go back to your team? Be like, okay, look, we haven't changed the plan. We need to move. We need to shift left. How would you respond to that, Sam?
Yeah, so I don't think that the two things are necessarily mutually exclusive, and I don't like where security ends up in competition with other business areas, right? You're all there, all of the business areas are there to make the business successful ultimately. So taking that example, it sounds, kind of similar in type of business, perhaps to FNZ, where I'm at the moment, where we develop. Develop software, develop technology, and that if the core business is around developing that technology, that is absolutely the thing that you should be supporting. Where we absolutely should look to collaborate with the CTO, though, might be around, if software is your product, how do you secure that software? Are we, building in proper secure development lifecycle steps? Are we making sure that our code is free from errors and all those sorts of things? So how really can you try and make that where you've got two separate areas overlap like a Venn diagram, and actually you can satisfy both to a level. But ultimately, I mean, if you were in that situation and you weren't able perhaps to reach that kind of mutually beneficial compromise, then either security isn't as big a priority and it's the right call, or you fail to articulate it in such a way that it demonstrates, where it is. And perhaps, one of the common pitfalls that people fall into is trying to do everything, right? And almost like we talked about a minute ago. So these are the areas that are really important to you if you're a software dev house. Actually, development code, enormously important. Where are you hosting your product? If it's software that you ship out to clients, fine, don't need to worry about that. But if it's something you host yourself in, your own data centers or AWS or anywhere else, how you secure that is going to be really important, because it's going to have a material impact to clients directly and to your reputation and those sorts of things. So trying to link it back to what your business is actually doing is really key. And as I say, the key takeaway from there is it shouldn't be a competition between security and other departments. You're all there to try and achieve the same thing. How
Yeah.
can you support each other to achieve that goal?
Yeah. And that answer in itself just demonstrates a very high level of emotional intelligence, which not everyone has, Sam. Not every person that I've come across has that empathy and that awareness of A, the business needs, but B, how teams operate, and C, how how people listen to you and how you talk in their language. And I've used this example on another podcast before, and it's the parenting sort of analogy. And I've got a 4-year-old and a 12-week-old, and whilst my 12-week-old doesn't have a Scooby-Doo, what I'm talking about right now, the 4-year-old, I think he sometimes listens to me, and the best times in which he listens to me is when I'm speaking to him in terms that he would actually understand, and. I actually, this is going off topic, but I will tell you. So just last week, we were off on annual leave and we are having some family time. And she's so small, is my 12-week-old. There's a point to this. That my 4-year-old, he gets so excited when he's around her. But he's like, he like bounces around her, and he makes me nervous sometimes when I'm
Yeah.
like, look, she's only small. I know you love it, and I know you're excited to see her, but just be calm around her. Um, And I just sat him down and I actually told him the story, the highlights of Mice and Men, and about George and Lenny, and how like Lenny's just like, he loves the rabbits, but he can sometimes be a bit like a bit strong. And when I was telling him about this story, I obviously didn't tell him the end latter bits about Curly's wife and all that, but I was telling him about like, he loved the rabbits, but he just patted them a bit too hard and he scared the rabbits. And he understood, and he started to back away and just be a bit more calm with his sister for an hour, and I think it went out of his head. Um, to bring that back around, he's like, I talked to him in his terms rather than say like, get away from your sister, like you're being too zealous, because then he'd be like, get confused. He'd be like, I'm just loving her. Bring that background to what we're talking about right now. You then bring it back into everyone learns in analogies and everyone learns in their own language because we're all not selfish, but we're all living our own lives and we're all got other stuff going on. And it's just like, make it easy for me. I just tell me what I need to know, and then I'll talk to it in my world, and then we can expand from there. I understand now, right? We're on the same page, Sam. Let's go from there. And the amount of times that that doesn't happen, and conflicts arise, and disputes happen, all because of misunderstandings, is tenfold. And it all comes back to the importance of emotional intelligence in the boardroom. And I don't know what you think, Sam, but do you see it when you sat in these boardrooms and you're like, this is going left, this where like we're just not understanding this. Like let's just calm down. It's like let's talk in each other's words. Is it still happening? What do you think?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the most nerve-wracking kind of board meetings for me is when I'm meeting a new board. And you don't know what resonates. So once you understand them a little bit, you kind of work out, oh, they like that analogy. That's fantastic, right?
Yes.
They don't like that. They didn't get that at all. I won't use that again. Yeah, if I go back to my EDF days, the one analogy that I was able to kind of use a lot was around safety because yeah, in the nuclear world, safety is king, right?
Yeah.
When I was talking about security incidents and events and those sorts of things, lots of glazed faces, right? Whereas when in the health and safety world, you talk about high potential events, somebody might have died. Low potential events, yeah, somebody might have had to pop down the minor injuries unit. Um, I was able to kind of use those terms, high potential events, low potential events for security incidents,
Yep.
and sort of start to show how that kind of moves through the system. I think there are two really important things to be able to get that right. The first one is, as you rightly point out, is emotional intelligence. So it's quite often, what can you learn about these people in advance? Can you go and speak to other people that have been to the board or the executive committee previously, and how do they present? Do they like that? Do they not like that? Find somebody that goes, it's hell, I hate going, and how are they presenting? Avoid that. Find somebody who's really successful at it and go, okay, what are the sorts of themes? In many cases, it's brevity. In some cases, it's say linking back to certain things. But understanding the motivations of those people is really key.
Yep.
I've always found that there's been one or two fairly difficult. I say difficult, challenging vocal people in these groups when you go there, and the most important thing I've done is understand what motivates them. So before I finish giving a point, I tend to point at them and say, and that sorts, that serves you, X person, because you want X, Y, and Z, and this delivers X, Y, and Z. Uh, and then they go, yeah, great. and there's no challenge. So if you're able to do those sorts of things, it's very helpful. A lot of people watching whilst you're in there, whilst I make certain points, I might try and three or four different techniques the first time and just watch the body language for the reactions, and then go, okay, I didn't like that one. That's no
Yes.
problem. We'll leave that one behind. Let's quickly pivot to something else.
Yes.
But it really needs you to understand what motivates the people in order to kind of make that work. And what is difficult is that in these groups, it's often not the same thing that motivates all of them. They're quite
Yeah.
often very different, depending on the different parts of the business that they represent, or their background, or what industry they tend to come from. There'll be quite different things. So sometimes you have to pepper sort of a few things in. Um, that's one thing that I like to think I do reasonably well, but it's fairly self-taught. The thing that I do less well, or historically I've done less well, and I've been working on a lot, is around storyboarding. So to your point of trying to get across a quite detailed, potentially quite technical concept in a really easy to follow story is very much a learned skill, and
Yeah.
something that I'm certainly still developing on. But I think, yeah, as you speak to extremely seasoned CISOs or C-level execs in any part of the business, that storyboarding aspect is really important and
Yeah.
builds upon that emotional intelligence and understanding people's motivations. So I'm
Absolutely.
halfway there, maybe, but
No, no, you're too modest, Sam. You're too modest. And it just reminded me of it's kind of like, and here's your tagline for the podcast. Like seesaws are kind of like comedians in the sense of like they comedians do like ghost show. I think they're called dark shows or whatever, where they're trying out their script and like, oh, that didn't work. Let's get rid of that joke, and then let's like, okay, oh yeah, let's do this one, because they have to tap into so much emotional intelligence to a crowd. They have to come in and make people laugh, but tread the line carefully with some of the humor, and like, yeah, oh, that didn't work, and they revisit it. So there's your tagline: seesaws are clowns, essentially. And that's the truth. Um, but no, no, obviously I say that in jest. But I suppose my final question for you, Sam, is this has been a terrific sort of half an hour in terms of learning the soft skills that CISOs need in the boardroom. But just as a caveat to that, the soft skills that you need in your team, like what are some things that you've learned from your managers in the past that you've took on board, or some things that again, like I don't like that. I'm going to make sure that I don't take that on board when I manage my teams. Excuse me. And how do you actually sort of manage your teams, sort of on the soft skill side, in today's world at FNZ then?
yeah. So I don't think that any of this is unique to security, right? This is just what I would sort of regard as good leadership, and I suppose I caveat everything I'll say with I've got a certain style, both as an employee and a manager, right? And I like, for example, to be given a rough topic to go in and sort of sort out, and I'll go and do it. So I like the autonomy to be able to just go and design something, go and build something, have complete control over that process. Other people, and I totally recognize this, would absolutely hate that. They want to be given much more, solid direction, much more, regular feedback, and those sorts of things. So the first thing is got to be understand the person
Yeah.
that you're leading, right, and which kind of camp they fall into. And I've oversimplified it massively because there's far more than two personality types, obviously. Where I've had fantastic leaders, and I've been really lucky to work for people that I've learned a lot from over the years. I've also had some not so fantastic leaders where I've gone, this is just unpleasant to come to work. It's really difficult. Perhaps they're the kind of Jekyll and Hyde. You don't know which type you're going to get. The classic micromanager is absolutely not somebody that I like to work for. I think what I've learned works really well for me, and I try and live these values, and hopefully my team would all agree, is I like to be really transparent, because I think if I'm expecting them to develop into really good senior leaders, they need to learn some of the skills we've talked about around the emotional intelligence and understanding motivations and those sorts of things. So I like to be really transparent with people about what's going on and why, and here are some of the motivations. The thing that I drive probably more carefully in the team is less about what they're producing, more about how they're communicating it with stakeholders. So that tends to be the area in security, especially, that we really struggle. And given everything that we've just talked about around, those soft skills of being able to communicate things, that tends to be the area where people need a little bit more help. And then when it comes to the actual decision making, the actual design of this thing, or the actual kind of implementation of it, typically they know what they're doing, and I trust them to get on with it. And I can be fairly laissez-faire at that point and say, well, if you've got a problem, come and tell me. And perhaps, when we catch up, just tell me how this, thing is going. I don't need, every detail, and I don't want to micromanage you, absolutely not. But let's just make sure we're on track for what we kind of said we would
Yeah.
deliver, or what we hope to. But yeah, really just transparency around, the motivations for the business. And then I think it helps. You made a point, much earlier on around, that conflict between CISO and CTO around funding, and when you've got to go back to your team and explain things. I think I would have been very transparent throughout that process around, well, actually, here's what we're competing kind of with, and
Yeah.
actually, perhaps even I agree with some of those things. Absolutely, that's the core business. We've got to be supporting that, but I'd be really disappointed if we didn't get these couple of kind of points across, and this is what I really want to focus on. And that enables the whole team to enable you as well, right? Because you're winning hearts and minds through the middle of the business, which absolutely bubbles up. So when you then go to, executive committee, and you go in front of, I don't know, the CFO, and they say, well, actually, yeah, your team manages finance really well because they're really transparent with us, and they engage really early in,
Yeah.
procurement process and things like that. Fantastic, great, that's a big win for me. And in other departments as well. So it enables them to support you, but also supports them whilst enabling their development without kind of stifling that. And I think where I've really not enjoyed working for someone in the past, it's where I felt stifled, and
Okay.
I couldn't work. I couldn't be creative. I couldn't perhaps lead some of those conversations or some of those relationships, and it was really difficult.
Yeah, no, and just a few words there that was jumping out to me is like business enabler, and the fact that like you're winning the hearts and minds was absolutely what I thought when sort of teeing up the question would be like, yeah, that would be my answer if that was sort of if the tables were turned on myself. So some absolutely golden gems there, Sam. And look, that pretty much brings us to a time. So if anybody has got any questions for Sam, or would like to learn more about his role at FNZ, or would just like to pick his brains and learn more about his leadership styles, and would like to learn more about the soft skills that he has developed over his terrific career, I'll be sure to put Sam's information down below. But once again, Sam, thank you very much for coming on the Security Space podcast.
Thank you, Nick, for having me.